সজীব স্যার, আপনি রেকর্ডিং করবেন?
হ্যাঁ, আমি রেকর্ড করছি। শুভ অপরাহ্ন। আমাদের আজকের এই স্পেশাল ওয়েবিনারে আমি সবাইকে স্বাগত জানাচ্ছি। আমাদের আজকের ওয়েবিনার হাউ টু রিপ্লাই টু রিভিউয়ার্স, ফিউ পয়েন্টস। আমাদের আজকে এই ওয়েবিনারে স্পিকার হিসেবে আছেন আমরা আতিকুর রহমান আহাদ, সিনিয়র মেম্বার IEEE, বর্তমানে স্পেশালি অ্যাপয়েন্টেড অ্যাসোসিয়েট প্রফেসর, ওসাকা ইউনিভার্সিটি, জাপান। তো অ্যাকচুয়ালি স্যার ইন্ট্রোডাকশন পছন্দ করেন না, সো আমি অ্যাকচুয়ালি আর ইন্ট্রোডাকশন দিতে চাচ্ছি না, সরাসরি স্যারকে তার ওয়েবিনারটি শুরু করার জন্য বিনীতভাবে অনুরোধ করছি।
ধন্যবাদ। আমি শুধু রিকোয়েস্ট করছি যে সামিন এবং সুজীব, যদি বিদেশি কাউকে মনে হয় চলে আসছে, তাহলে জিজ্ঞেস করে কনফার্ম হলে আমাকে বললে আমি ইংরেজিতে বলবো আর কি। তো আমাকে তাহলে মানে আনমিউট করে আমাকে বলবে, আদারওয়াইজ আমি বাংলাতেই বলা স্বাচ্ছন্দ্য বোধ করি। তো ধন্যবাদ সবাইকে আজকের এই ওয়েবিনার। তো হাউ টু রিপ্লাই টু রিভিউয়ার্স, ফিউ পয়েন্টস, অর্গানাইজড বাই IEEE কম্পিউটার সোসাইটি বাংলাদেশ চ্যাপ্টার। আমি IEEE কম্পিউটার সোসাইটি বাংলাদেশ চ্যাপ্টারকে ধন্যবাদ জানাই। অ্যালং উইথ দ্যাট, এটা হচ্ছে ICIEV এবং IVPR কিনোট সিরিজ নাম্বার 7। ICIEV এবং IVPR এই কনফারেন্স যেটা বাংলাদেশে জন্ম হয় এবং পরবর্তীতে জাপান, আমেরিকা, জাপান। তো এই 10বার আমরা এখানে হয়তো কেউ থাকতে পারে যারা ICIEV অ্যাটেন্ড করেছে, যেমন সজীব সাহা, প্রফেসর আজিম এন্ড আদার্স। তো আনফরচুনেটলি কোভিড এর কারণে আমরা এটা অর্গানাইজ করতে পারিনি। তো জাপানে এটা হবে অনলাইন এন্ড অফলাইন মোড। তো অনলাইনে আপনারা অ্যাটেন্ড করতে পারবেন। তো উইথ দ্যাট ইনভাইটেশন আমি শুরু করছি। তো রিভিউটাল যেটা আমরা বলি, হাউ টু রিপ্লাই টু রিভিউয়ার্স, ফিউ পয়েন্টসে আসলে হবে। লেটস ডিসকাস। আপনাদের প্রেজেন্টেশনের পরে আপনাদের যদি কোনো না, আপনাদের আসলে বিভিন্ন রকমের নিজস্ব অভিজ্ঞতা থাকবে, সেগুলো আপনারা শেয়ার করবেন, সো দ্যাট উই ক্যান লার্ন ফ্রম ইচ আদার। এটা হচ্ছে মূল উদ্দেশ্য, কারণ এটা এত সহজ বিষয় না যে আমরা যে কাউকে সহজে খুশি করতে পারবো, এবং ডিফারেন্ট জার্নাল বা ডিফারেন্ট ডোমেইনে পার্সপেক্টিভ ডিফারেন্ট হতে পারে। তো আমার নাম হচ্ছে মোহাম্মদ আতিকুর রহমান আহাদ। আমি ঢাকা বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ে কর্মরত, আপাতত ছুটিতে। আমি ওসাকা বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ে কাজ করছি। এটা আমার হচ্ছে ওয়েবসাইট ahadvisionlab.com, আর এটা আমার ব্যক্তিগত ইমেল অ্যাড্রেস। আপনারা প্রয়োজনে আমার ওয়েবসাইটে গিয়ে আমার কাজকর্ম দেখতে পারেন এবং ইমেল করতে পারেন, সো দ্যাট উই ক্যান লার্ন ফ্রম ইচ আদার। সো কিছু ডিসক্লেমার করে নেই যে এটা আসলে মূলত টু ইনিশিয়েট সাম ডিসকাশনস অ্যান্ড শেয়ারিং আইডিয়াস। এখানে আসলে সেটা হচ্ছে যে সাম এক্সাম্পলস ফ্রম ভেরিয়াস গুড জার্নালস। আমি
একটু ইন্টারাপ্ট করছি, খুব সম্ভবত someone is from abroad, so he or she is expecting in English.
Okay. Where are you from? The foreigner, non-Bangladeshi. Pakistan. Okay.
Pakistan.
Okay. So welcome to this webinar. I'll speak in English, no problem. So this is not so easy topic.
Sir, just one point, sir. So you continue in English, but for our Bangladeshi participants, in the later portion or in the question and answering session, please try to discuss few important things in Bengali.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. So basically, I put some examples from various good journal publishers. So put more emphasis, and that's why you will find relative repetitions of some of the important points from different journals like IEEE or Elsevier or ACM and Nature even. The following points are based on my experiences after getting kicked and strong comments from hundreds of reviewers. I have some good and crap and low quality and mid quality works, published works. So I faced lots of sufferings from different reviewers. That's why I feel that our younger generation and young researchers, they don't face those troubles. These are not the perfect advices, whatever I will provide today. And there are many more points which I could not cover, definitely. And when I was preparing this slide, I found it very difficult, even though I used to give and present many different topics easily. I mean, I try always, but this time it becomes very challenging. And so hope that you learn a bit, and through the discussion, especially in the QA session, we can learn from each other to improve. And feel free to ask any questions or rebut, like oppose me, write in the chat box so that we can discuss later on, ask when I finish. And reviewers, from this talk, you will get some idea on how to be a better judge. And authors, definitely you can learn a lot on different aspects. About me, because some of you may have joined, so who I am, it is important that I mean, we get the confidence on the speaker. So I am working on as an editorial board member of Scientific Reports Nature for over 9 years from the beginning. Working as an associate editor of Frontiers and Computer Science Frontiers, which is, I mean, one of the top 5 global publishers in terms of many ranking. I have been serving as a guest editor or lead guest editor of several journals, especially Pattern Recognition Letters Elsevier, and editor-in-chief of one journal, as well as with few books and papers, whatever I published. I got many kicks than acceptance. Basically, some few works I got 4 or 5 times rejections, and then I published in some papers. So every time I had to fight with them, and through these fightings, I learned something. Of course, I am part of some top and mid-level conferences and journals elsewhere. So these are the points. I just mentioned that Professor Richard Thaler, who is a Nobel Prize winner in economics in 2017, he said that in the interest of young scientists, and which I think a lot of young scientists don't pay attention to the writing. I don't mean writing a novel. When you do research, the end product is something written, and unless you have written it down, you haven't done anything. It means that we have to write very smartly, very, I mean, as best as possible, so that it can be accepted. This is number 1 point. So in this presentation, I will mention many points which are applicable during the first submission. And I strongly recommend that we try to note down as much as possible these points, so that when we submit the first draft, we don't make those mistakes. And when we reply after revision, because you may get rejection, so there is no issue of rebuttal, because if you get rejected. Again, I welcome you all to submit these 2 conferences. IEEE Explore, I mean, Scopus Indexed, I mean, definitely. So ICIEV and IVPR in Japan. So we know that peer review means the reviewer will judge the paper, and we can get accept, very rare to get acceptance, except with minor revision. And in some cases, they just mention revision, not minor or major. Internally, the associate editor or editorial board members or editor-in-chief, we know that the paper is a minor or major, but authors don't know. They just get the revision in some journals. In some journals, they get the minor and major and so on. And many cases we can get rejection, but don't be upset if you get rejected. So blindness is another term. Like single blind peer review means authors don't know the identities of the reviewers, but the reviewers know. But I found that in many conferences and journals, especially in journals, the original paper has no author information, but when we submit, we put author's information as a form or as cover letter, and those are added to make one PDF, and over there we can get the author information. So basically that doesn't make sense of, I mean, double blind case, which means that no author's information, even no acknowledgement in the original manuscript. When it is accepted, you can add. And of course, you cannot get the reviewer information. But in some case, you can get like this, what you can see, that after the publication, if the paper is accepted, then they mention who was the editor. So, and the reviewers information as well. So these are the, I mean, few cases you can find. Steps of peer review. This is from Optical Society of America, the Optical Society, one of the largest, academic body, and the #1 in optics and so on. So first we submit the paper. Initially, staffs do the quality check. Initial editorial assessment, you can have disk reject, that it is out of scope or too, stupid way the paper is presented or written, so disk reject. Otherwise, editor assigns a topical or topic-wise or associate editor who can select some experts or reviewers. When reviewers are done, editor takes final decision based on comments. In between, some journals, they have associate editor and then editor in chief. So, so these are the few steps. And in some craft journals or business-oriented journals, even Q1 journal, the publishers are basically money-earning publishers. So, what they do, they have paid professional staffs, and they handle most of the works. You never know who, you never get any single sentence from the editor-in-chief or associate editor or something. So that's why, in core academic domain, those journals' reputations are not so good. So even if the impact factor is more because open access or they have much more marketing policies and so on, but make sure that you submit in a better journal. Don't just trust a reviewer. This is important because many reviewers can be weird, non-expert or racist even. I'll mention a few of them. So the editors should not trust a reviewer directly. Editors must read the comments, check the paper corresponding points, and find whether enough arguments are logical for revision or reject or accept. Based on this, you can assign more reviewers and so on. So these are the few points we need to know. And red list those careless reviewers, and racism is real, not in our life, but in academia as well, especially for poor countries and other issues, not to mention here. So these are the few steps I mentioned, and this is more or less everywhere. So one point I'd like to mention, that when you get paper rejected, don't be upset. And when you get a paper accepted, don't be super happy at the beginning because it may be rejected later on. I know that initially it was a minor revision, but after the second revision, maybe the reviewer found something extraordinary points and it was rejected in top journals or good journals. So, for example, a MovieCom is a top conference, and one student submitted a version and it got 1, 2, 3 scored and rejected. The same author, after a few days, changed the title and submitted another paper, but could not or did not delete the first version. So what happened? The second version got 3, 4, 5 and was accepted. So it's natural that reviewers can be mistaken and they can make different arguments. Another point is that, even if your paper is rejected, don't be upset. For example, this paper by David Lowe from Canada, his paper was rejected in ICIEV, International Conference on Computer Vision and Pattern Recognition, 2 #1 conferences in the computer vision domain. The rejected paper later on was accepted and then published in IEEE Journal of Computer Vision. And you see that, just until last month, one paper, it was cited, almost 62,000 times. So how impactful work it was or it is, but it was rejected by 2 consecutive top conferences. So it may happen. So even if, it is rejected, your paper is rejected or strong review, you can rebut. I'll mention what is rebuttal. Then I go for review criteria. I'll mention a lot about issues so that your overall manuscript can be, good. So when we submit a paper, scope is important, whether the scope is, the paper is within the scope, whether it's significant. So when you submit a paper, make sure that novelty, significance, impact, whether your paper has significant impact on new results, this kind of information, and your methodology is valid based on the results, and it is validating in the conclusions as well, and definitely your writing is good. Nowadays it becomes a business for some publishers, and they push I don't know whether there is any behind the scenes syndicates, but of course, I mean, many reviewers than the past, they say that go for grammatical check. And now for developing countries, it is extremely difficult, because if you go for professional grammatical checking or language checking, and you need to give a proof. So on that case, that proof means you have to submit the paper to some group, and you have to pay like I mean, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, even more, this kind of amount, which is, I mean, abnormal to think for many cases, or especially for Bangladesh and developing countries like India and others. And I don't think that we need to pay that much, because once upon a time there was nothing like that, and there was no syndicate like these, or no professional checking or others. Papers were accepted and published. So that's why when you submit, make sure that you don't make any silly mistakes, and everything is well organized, so that the first look is good. And sometimes supplementary materials are like, I'll mention as well, that some extra materials which are not included in the paper, but you can add as video or image or data or code even, or some citations or tables, so that if a reader needs to know further, they can look into the supplementary materials. And those supplementary materials are reviewed as well, but not strictly as it is done for the main paper. So when you submit, make sure that language is good, improve writing skill, write like a story, no spelling mistakes, no, I mean, grammatical mistakes and mixed patterns and so on. And make sure that you check it. If you use LaTeX, then it's good. No copy paste of images, you draw, and make sure that images are clean and high quality and so on, and no extra colors. Revise submission, rebuttal, where you must answer all comments from the reviewers. You may disagree, but be logical, okay? And before you submit, all authors need to approve the rebuttal or revised submission, and make sure that you write everything properly, and make sure that the corresponding author provides the email address and does the all communication and takes the main responsibility of the paper. In the review rebuttal, what you call debate, that means arguing with the reviewers, rebut or deny or disapprove or invalidate. It means that you claim or prove that the evidence or accusation is false. Like if a reviewer says that the paper, this method is wrong, you can argue, but you have to argue to convince him or her. If you cannot convince the reviewer will say that, oh, I'm not convinced, and he can or she can give rejection. So, and drive back or repel a person or attack. Do it professionally, logically, with strong references and arguments. I'll give some examples. You may fight and go against a comment too. Especially, it is important. I'll tell you why. Because sometimes, or many of the cases, you don't know the reviewers, but you can predict that the reviewers is not expert, or not not expert. That definitely. For example, according to the Optical Society of America, I mentioned one of the top publishers and academic society in the world. They say that who can or should become a reviewer: postdocs, early career researchers, blah, 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 even graduate students. Grad students means masters or PhD students. Definitely in developing countries, research is not so strong, but in rich countries, especially good universities, not all universities in America, not all universities in Australia or England, but in good or medium level universities, grad students are good. They do good research. And what happened that, supervisors, sometimes they assign them to review a paper. Now, if the student is busy or doesn't have knowledge, then the review can be very weird and weak. So this is one point. Next point is that if you are a student, my point is that if you are a graduate student even, and no knowledge, not doesn't have reasonable knowledge, please decline any request. I mean, if you get a request even from a good journal, doesn't mean that you have to accept the request, because it is injustice to review a wrong paper. This is another Frontiers, one of the top publishers in the world. They say that, make sure that whether the work falls within your area of expertise, and they feel that the reviewer should have a PhD or equivalent degree or something like this, or good experience. Now, the point is that if you, okay, another point, in medical and other domain, especially patient treatment, there one of the reviewers must be based on clinical side, so that he or she can judge the paper. So if your work has something which you get that the answer is opposite, like my paper is on autism, so I worked on autistic children but using machine learning or AI or eye tracking and others, but the paper is sent to all psychologists, because autism and mental health psychologists, these kind of things are correlated, affective computing. And if the reviewer is not related to AI or machine learning, and my core concentration is on AI and machine learning, then the reviewer may give some comments which are not that much relevant, or maybe relevant but are not possible to do for this kind of domain. So something like that. So this is one point. And another point is that if your paper has something core clinical things, and if you find that the reviewer did not understand the basic point of this one, that means the reviewer is not expert. On that case, you have the guards to reply and profoundly, because you can feel that the reviewer is not so strong. But at the same time, you make sure that your replies are strong and accurate and explainable to the reviewer, so that even if the reviewer is not related expert, but he or she can understand better through your explanations. Student reviewer, yes, it's very common. I mentioned maybe very young students who just published one paper as a co-author. It means that the reviewer has almost no knowledge about the topic. Now, as associate editor, or editor-in-chief, when we go to the journal system and assign reviewers, we have different journal has different options, but we search on the topic and others, and who published recent works. So based on the searching, it may happen that we get some of the names which are common, like 10 people I got selected. So I selected 3 or 5 or 4 based on this. It is difficult to select each and every person by understanding what are their works. So on that case, it may happen that a 4th year undergraduate student or just new master student having only one publication as a co-author, gets invitation from top journals or mid-level journals, even IEEE Access. One of my students, Swapnil Shaha, he was then final year student, undergraduate, and he got a letter from IEEE Access because we published a paper and he was the main author. So just they mail him, but it is not good to submit, but we don't know. So this is important. Number 2, associate editor may try many people, and if they don't get, then they can assign someone. So young guy will agree to learn because it's a prestige that, oh, I got a good journal and so on. Or a very busy supervisor can give a student to review the paper, and then credit goes to the boss because reviewer will be basically, and professor will just upload and so on. So hence comments can be weird, wrong, or even inappropriate. So do not worry to review it or argue with the reviewers. But whatever you do, we need to be like logical and in a smart manner. I give you a few more examples. Like Scientific Reports is a journal, as you know, from Nature. It's a flat journal. So I'm part of that journal from the beginning. So two reviewers, what they say that take a moment to think. If you receive this report, would you find it constructive? And whether it is professional, and focus of the paper. And see, Scientific Reports Nature, they say, Nature Publishing Group, they are saying to the reviewers that focus on the content of the paper, not the authors. Stop academic racism or bias. It means that even we know academic domain, we know that racism exists behind the scene in terms of reviewing a paper. And many people, especially, I mean, very good works from developing countries, especially medical domain and so on, I found a good amount of complaints and afsus and frustrations that, I mean, they get, I mean, racism, even desk reject without thinking further. So that's why, I mean, you must understand that it may happen. So in the rebuttal, if you find that there is something fishy or bias or racism against you, make sure that you argue it professionally, but of course politely. So this is important. Don't just pull yourself back. If you are confident, always try to argue as much as possible. And even if a paper is rejected or disreject, you can write to the all editors, go get the email address, not the system, because system, basically they check by the stuffs, paid stuffs. But if you email to the main editors, even some of the related associate editors, by email and argue with them that why the hell you did that, how, what are the reasons? Because if you disreject something, you must mention the reason. But some journals, like for example MDPI, they have huge paid stuffs, and you submit a paper, because when you submit a paper, you need to reformat the paper according to the paper system and so on, template. It's hard work. You submit it, even submission takes, I mean, half an hour, 1 hour in some cases. And then without any reason, they say that, oh, it's out of the scope or something, especially if they can, I mean, predict that you cannot pay. So, and there is no reason that why the paper is out of scope and so on. So you will need to fight. But if you submit to those journals, you cannot get any answer from them. Praise and thank. For example, dear editor-in-chief or dear associate editor or the dear guest editor, we'd like to thank blah, blah, blah. We highlight the general concerns of reviewers that were common. And we also address comments specific to each reviewer below and some other points. And of course, you thank too much. Make sure that in the reply email or in the system, whether there is any specific comment from the editor-in-chief, because editor-in-chief can add or highlight 1 or 2 points from the overall comments. So make sure that it is, I mean, you know that. Also check whether the associate editor has some comments on your, I mean, paper, apart from the review comments, because you can have minimum 2, 3, 4 reviewers, 5 reviewers, and then associate editor comments on those. If the associate editor is busy, he will say that, okay, do just a common template that follow the comments from the reviewers, finish. But associate editor from good journals should look into all the comments, review comments, and pick some of the good points, or maybe he may consider himself, I'll mention he in most of the cases, so consider a she, because there is no gender bias. Okay, so the review associate editor can consider that there are some other points which are not mentioned by the reviewers, so he or she can add. Editor-in-chief at the top can add more comments. Just recently in pattern recognition letters, 2 papers are accepted, so we got similar, I mean, comments from all stages, and we try to address one by one for every case. And remember, answer to all, even though some repetitions, because reviewer 1, reviewer 3, associate editor may have same question or similar questions. So what you need to do, that you reply each of them separately, because when you submit the rebuttal, a reviewer may read, in fact, almost 100% cases, only the part he wrote, only the parts he mentioned. I mean, he or she has no time to read all the review comments, and rebuttal can be longer than the paper itself. It may happen because you explain much more. Sometimes you add much more examples and extra results and so on, which you may not include in the paper because the paper may have page limits. So on that case, you need to add extra lots of information. And if the associate editor or the reviewer feel that, okay, add those information as supplementary materials, then you can do it. But otherwise, no need to add supplementary materials if you don't feel, it is necessary. In the revision, a previous reviewer, this is another important point, may not give time to re-review. I'm dealing this kind of challenges for, over a decade. It's a very tough job because first time reviewer 1, 2, 3, 3 reviewers reviewed. After 2 months or 1 month, authors submit the paper. Then we assign to those reviewers because they reviewed the paper earlier. So we request them, please review the paper again. And they should give just 1 hour maximum because they can check only their comments. But sometimes we become so busy or lazy or reluctant to help. So they can say that, okay, no need, or we cannot, decline. So what we need to do? We need to engage new additional reviewer who will read all comments or rebuttals. See, now you have another new reviewer. So the new reviewer may read the rebuttals, all review comments to give a judgment, or review the paper as a new paper to him or her. So that will make delay the process for results. So remember that, just like just last month, one good journal, I found in the system that the paper is under review, then review finished to the editor. I was waiting eagerly and every day checking again and again, just like a kid. Young researchers, they do always like this, but I consider myself as a young researcher. So every time I submit, I try to see the results as well. With lots of patience. And what I see suddenly that the review, it is to reviewer again. Again, it is assigned to reviewers. It means that maybe the review comments are different, or 2 reviews are accepted, another rejected, or no answer, and so on. So they try to assign another one, and then again 1 month or 2 months delay. So hence, when you reply in the rebuttal in such a manner so that a new reviewer can understand fully without looking into the full paper carefully. Reviewers are all free, we know, even associate editors. We give so much time, but we get nothing. So it is important that our time is valuable. So if we can manage our time, and then it is good. So always rebuttal or review reply should in such a manner so that a new reviewer or the previous reviewer can make it very easy and nice. Another point is that I know my work, and reviewers reviewed the paper maybe 2 or 3 months before, because after the revision, and then after the review comments, I do revisions and then I submit. By this time, reviewer can forget everything, why or what he or she wrote. So you must reply in detail and as clear as possible, so that that guy can easily understand. Another point is that refer the changes with section number or table or figure. Like, for example, following the comments of reviewer 1, we did this, and write like this, that we mentioned the changes in the section 3.2, or we mentioned the changes in table 6, so that reviewer 1 can just look into the original paper, only that part where the changes are made, because already I saw the entire paper as a reviewer. Now I need to see where the changes are made based on my comments. I don't care, usually who the other reviewers are and what are their comments. Of course, it is the responsibility of associate editor or the editor-in-chief to look into everything, but a reviewer can only look into that point. So you make sure that your reviewer is relaxed and not much time. A reviewer, does not need to think to review a paper. You do the thinking and make lots of easy ways to make it understandable. Even if needed, you can make a flow chart or flow diagram or something like that. Another is that, like this, that comment 1, put the full comments and then put the full response, and then make sure what are the things. Response but not formal, no references. Don't do that. For example, this is the question and response. The author wrote, for example, SHL 18, 1920, gag, and R, number one, ABC, these kind of things, but maybe not prepared. It was like a draft and no time, so you submit like this way. No, it will be rejected because remember, if your paper was judged wrongly, at the beginning, you got some strong review comments. Now you are submitting rebuttal, and most of the cases, reviewers will read only the replies, item by item of each question. On that case, write like this manner, that as beautiful as possible. And I just put colors so it's just for visualization. So you can mention within that section that to argue your point, the previous one you are saying that deep learning methods are not the number one, as in the vision or image domain. Then you give some examples. What about you mention that a book chapter or good paper where those issues are discussed, and also mention the full name of other references and full papers and so on, and put references at the end, put tables and some results and so on. You must check if any marked PDF is attached by reviewer. I tell it again that sometimes you get the review comments by email. You go to the online system, you check and get the comments, but it may happen that a reviewer can add a PDF or image marking the, review comments. Okay. And it happened in a good journal from Bangladesh, and all the authors are PhD. Two of them are full professors. I don't, and another one assistant professor. I know them, they are very close to me. And I found that very surprisingly that they did not reply to one of the reviewers. They said that we did not find any comments, or we could not download the PDF, something like this. And finally, the editor-in-chief rejected the paper. Now, why you do that? I mean, you must remember that if there is something missing, email to the associate editor or editor-in-chief and the staff and the associate editor or guest editor all together that I don't understand, did I miss anything, or there is no comment. Or it may happen, it happened a couple of times, that wrong review comments. Like, I'm a reviewer, I was working on that, but instead of putting the review comments for one paper, because sometimes we write the review comments in a document file and then copy and paste, but when paste, maybe wrong action. So what happened that based on this, the paper was rejected. Wrong review comment, paper was rejected. So what happened? We wrote to the editor-in-chief. And by this time, unfortunately, that was from a good journal. I don't want to mention that. The editor-in-chief of that journal, and it was IEEE transaction of one. Editor-in-chief has was replaced by a new editor-in-chief. Now, what happened during this transition? Mails for a few months, no reply. Then we communicated again, they said, sorry, we'll check. And finally, what they said? They said that the paper is out of scope or something. And how long you can argue? So it may happen. I don't know why they say out of scope. They can say, we are sorry, we will assign another reviewer and something like this, but they didn't do that. And this is one point. But on that time, I was not that much courageous as I am now, so I did nothing. But I request you, if you find like this, you can strictly complain about the journal, editorial team, editorial board, even to the society's president. So if you do that, they can realize, because they do injustice through this process. Show additional figures, tables, or results to support your replies, even though those are not included in the revised paper, which I mentioned that if your paper has 8 pages, and if you add too many new results, because reviewer asked many questions which are not clear from the results, so you can show them that, oh, we did this, we did that, but we could not add because of page limit. Mention this always, that because of page limit, we could not add this information, this discussion, these explanations, and so on. Add references that can provide support for your students. Sometimes we give some argument which is against the review comments. Reviewer thinks this way, I am thinking opposite way. So find good journals or good conferences from where you can justify your argument. You can say that, oh, thank you, your points are good, or I appreciate your comments. However, we think differently, or we found that those paper give 10 papers references that based on these our argument is justified, or something like that. Add extra results. Use bullet points. Normally in the paper we try to avoid bullet points, but use bullet points and something and explain. Another, just one example, like in this rebuttal, for example, we put the reference, what do you call reference, and also direct double quote point to justify our, validity or something like this. Okay, so when you do that, then it gives like a strong point. For example, we used a data set, and this data set has some points which clearly mentioned in their paper, and reviewer was saying opposite. So we argued with the reviewer by these kind of strong points. Still, I don't know whether it will be accepted or not, because this paper is still under review. And you can add at the beginning or at the end overall information regarding the manuscript, what you change, like 4, 5, 10 points. Okay, and remember, don't feel happy that, oh, I have done. No, you did not finish the work yet. Be a strict reviewer and find what are the missing points. Never submit unless you are satisfied with it. If you need more time, you can ask for time. There is no problem. We can always get extra time. Only conferences have a strict timeline. Journals, but of course, you email to the associate editor or and staff that you need more time. Let's ask for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. They will give 1 week or 10 days or something like that. And you can say that, okay, we have to give some reason that we have multiple tasks together and we are working on that and so on. It is easy, but do not hurry to submit poor reply and get kicked out. Okay, I have seen initially minor revision, but finally reviewers rejected the papers. And it is possible. Why? Because minor revisions, but there were still few points which are important. But reviewers thought that, oh, minor, or these are silly things. So they just answered a very small answer, did not pay real attention on those, and then the paper is rejected. So, and remember, you know your work, but is it clarified properly? Where you disagree, explain why and how your thinkings are different. If you are unclear on a query, it may happen that reviewer said something and you have no clue what the hell he said. So you answer with multiple assumptions of the questions. So I am telling it again, that if you do not answer and understand a question or comment from a reviewer, you thank him or her, and then you can try to answer the questions with different meaning or mindset or multiple assumptions on the questions, so that it can be better explained. Because if you write that, oh, give me your thinking, you may not get the answer. Okay, so that's why it is important. Do not write poor English. Your paper may be poor in terms of language, but when you write the rebuttal, okay, you try to make it as better as possible, because in the second revision, most of the cases, only review replies are read by the reviewers. I give some more guidelines which can be useful for paper writing at the beginning, also rebuttal. So these are common. Like, for example, if this is based on Scientific Reports Nature Publishing Group, that they said that if the revision give clear and constructive advice, so that authors can make it better to make it acceptable. This is the request from the Nature to the reviewers. It means that if any any replies are not clear, like reviewers gave you some reject or major revision without any genuine reasons, then you may argue. You can say that we are not sure why did you reject this paper. But of course, you don't say that why, you say in a different way and highlight your paper again in the rebuttal. Okay, because authors must give clear and constructive advice. Without good and clear constructive advice, you cannot reject, okay, or give major revision, because what kind of change you will make if you do not get any constructive advice? So if you do not get this kind of things and unclear to you, you can write to the editor-in-chief or associate editor. Sometimes if your writing is good but reviewer asks for professional editing, you can also argue with better language. Make sure that when you reply, your language is poor. Okay, so this is important, that I mean, for professional writing issue. So in some cases, what I did, I told them that, see, I have published this amount of books with Springer. I have published this amount of journals and conference papers so far. So I don't think that my language is that bad. And I don't have money to spend on professional editing. But what I'll promise, that I will, and all the authors will check it 3-4 times more carefully, make sure that there is not a single grammatical and type issues or typo, and also we'll engage to some of our friends who are good at language as well as knowledge, so that, I mean, the paper can be better. So this way you can make the journal that they can accept it. Because I found a journal in Japan, they said that when you submit the first submission, you have to submit a certificate of language check, because that is basically Japan-based journal. So they want that the language is very good and so on. So this is also important. Then I argued them, and what happened? The editor-in-chief copied some of the parts of my paper and mentioned that, see, these are the points where you need to address, because your writing style, because many non-speaking people, non-native English, what we do, we write very long sentences. We mix up grammars with an active and passive patterns, and few other common mistakes we do. Okay, so these are, I mean, and it's not like a storytelling, and papers, I mean, doesn't have any clustered information, like one block of information then move to another block of information, something like this. It's not any storytelling. So that's why, I mean, some reviewers find it very, very difficult. And I found many cases, especially from non-native cases, that the flow of, I mean, story is, our readability of the paper is very, very difficult. And you know that, I mean, in machine learning, AI, computer vision, Chinese authors globally are, I mean, almost 50%, I think. Okay, even last year in CVPR, the computer vision and pattern recognition #1 conference, and extremely difficult. I mean, about 39% only from China among the authors, and in America 25%, in other countries others. But among those authors, there are many Chinese. Okay, so definitely there are 50% plus Chinese, and we know that Chinese and Japanese and Koreans, they are not good at writing in English. So, and sometimes they use different translators and so on. And I also have seen many friends like that. So they use professional editing, but it may happen that the professional language editors or writers, they may not understand the concept properly. So whatever they write or change, it may not be perfect, but the work is good. So that's why, I mean, I find many papers that even I cannot understand properly about the concept or flow of readings and so on. So if we can make sure that our writing is good and well polished, then you don't need to write novel, which, I mean, Professor Richard says, Nobel laureate, that you don't need to write, I mean, uh, mm, but you need to write, you need to give time for writing. So this is important. Guidelines highlight the points of paper rebuttal. Is the study the design appropriate to answer the research questions or goals you achieved? Conclusions supporting, and methods reproducible of a research. Is it possible? Okay, it's not a medicine you get in the dream. and a few other points like, which I mentioned already. And of course, fabricated, images or manipulated images, especially electrophoric gels or blots in chemistry or biological domain and so on. Another point is that, is the study design appropriate? And so on, methods and statistics and so on. So these points you need to make sure you reply properly. Rejection should have clear explanation. So if your paper is rejected, you can ask the reviewer in the rebuttal, because one may reject. Like in one case we found that the reviewer one rejected our paper because he mentioned nothing, just 2 or 3 sentences, and then he said that reject. He did not mention reject, but we understood that second reviewer, he put lots of comments and gave major revision. This is also I understood. Now, associate editor, in his reply, he added himself as third reviewer, and he put some more comments. And I feel that the associate editor felt that our paper is good, and also the first reviewer did not put too much comments. So it means that he is not important to the associate editor. So he said that answer all the questions 100% by the reviewer, second reviewer, and try to make the reviewers happy. And I don't know how you make the reviewer one, but do as much as possible. So it means that even the associate editor realized that the first reviewer's no explanation rejection is not considered, or it's not good. So before you submit your rebuttal, please review your rebuttal thoroughly. Like, you answer it properly. So these are the few points, and when you make sure that it's original, scientific quality is there, relevance to the field of the journal is, and presentation. So regarding rebuttal, sometimes we find that reply that one of the reviewers can say that this paper is not related to this journal. When someone says like that, this is very weird, because if the paper is not related to the scope of the journal, why the paper is in the review process, and another reviewer reviewed the paper and gave comments, and associate editor gave the comments, and why did you spend 3, 4, 5 months for my paper? Because it's a wastage of time. So if someone writes like this, that this is out of the scope, so you can argue like this way. Don't say why, write differently, and find another 5 or even 10 papers from the same journal, those which are published in the recent past, and you mentioned that I think that it is very much relevant, and that's why the editor-in-chief or associate editor assigned the paper to the reviewers. And then these are the following 10 papers we mentioned, which are similar to our paper in terms of contents and topics and so on. So that's why we feel strongly that this paper is relevant to the paper, something like that. Because if someone is saying that the paper is not relevant, basically he or she is rejecting your paper. So, and then if 2 others are like major or minor revisions, finally the paper can be rejected, because not all associate editors are genuinely responsible to read all the comments and make a decision. It may happen that just looking at the reject, major, minor in the system, make a decision. It may happen, or just looking at a bit. So these are the points. So regarding this, when in the rebuttal, even at the rebuttal, you explain these in your answers, like originality, scientific quality, definitely the paper is relevant to this journal, and presentation style. Especially if a reviewer seems strict or unclear on your contributions, because most of the cases it may happen that reviewer is not clear on the questions. So you can make sure that you make the point clear to the reviewer, because when we write, the abstract is not good. Most of the papers do not put a flow diagram or flow chart or system or step-by-step points. And sometimes you write I mean, I know that's, and you also know that many cases, some authors make the paper difficult. I don't know why you make the paper difficult, because difficult things are not good. We love simple people. We hate difficult people. So it means that we love paper which is easy to read, not difficult. But I found many papers, and especially in my exact domain where I know little bit. So when I read the paper, I need several minutes to understand the block diagram, first block diagram, the steps. And I become surprised of why the hell the paper is, I mean, so difficultly written, unnecessarily, I mean, make it difficult, diagrams and so on. The basic steps are basically 4 or 5 blocks. So that's why if you have something like that, make sure you make it simple. Okay, it's not that, I mean, if you make it something difficult, people will love it. Most important point is this, the reviewer must understand it. Okay, this is important. Reviewers instructions are like this, that reviewers need to check strength of the paper, weakness of the paper, and that's why in the rebuttal you need to consider this SWOT, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of your work if there's a relevant. So you try to highlight those things accordingly. Sometimes in the main paper we cannot write all the things. Maybe we wrote in one sentence for all those 4 points in the conclusions or in the discussion part. But in the rebuttal, which is not published, so you can mention and highlight much more on this. So this is important. Reviewers are asked to mention major and minor changes. So that's why as an author, when you write, you make sure that you make 2 separate lists if there is any major and minor. So major questions, you need more attention, because if none of the majors are addressed or not satisfiable, then reviewer can reject the paper. Minor changes, yeah, it's okay, you can do it. So another point is that in many journals, we know that highlights and graphical abstract is present. So what are those? Highlights are meaningful and accurate representation of the article. So usually you have to write in some characters. So for example, here, 3 to 5 points, you have to write in 85 characters, including spaces per bullet point. If you write more or less, you will be returned again. Now, another point is that, I mean, graphical abstract, that means the flow chart or block diagram or something, it's optional in some cases. But even if it is optional, you have to write the title of the paper and author's name. Now, in the next slide, I'm mentioning that in some cases, reviewers can suggest you to change the title. If you think that it is justifiable, we did that in a just recent paper, which is published finally, I mean, accepted. So this, one reviewer told us to change the title and gave us some reasons. So when we change the titles, definitely we change the abstract and many things consequently. So what are the things we changed sequentially, we have to mention. And on that case, graphical abstract, here the title should be changed. Some cases we need to add authors because the previous authors become busy or lazy or reluctant to work anymore, but you cannot kick them out. Officially in strong groups, they just kick the authors who are not working further, okay, because no need. So it may happen, and I have seen that it is done by some groups. But you need to add another author who can help you to polish the paper, to work further, or need an expert who can give you, because reviewers gave some point and then you need an expert who can highlight those points because your team, I mean, doesn't have this ability. So, but you cannot add a new author easily, very difficult. So that's why you need to email the authority and make sure that they give you permission. Different journal and conferences have their different strategies. And another recent cases, I mean, 2 cases, basically we had to add authors Another case, we had to reshuffle the first author become third author and something like that. And we need to argue what are the reasons and give the approval and permission and add the system. And on that case, all authors needed to sign the document that we agree upon the new author sequences and so on. So it is very, very important. If we do not do this and want to submit the final submission, then it will not be allowed, it will be delayed, and you will be in trouble and so on. So make sure that you handle these kind of things from the beginning. Research highlights sometimes 125 characters. Here I mentioned 85 characters. So make sure that you make it. So what happened that we did not notice that 125 characters including spaces. So after 2 weeks, they put the paper back to the author system and we did not notice it. So, and another point is that, and it was delayed because they did not send to the reviewers. Another point is that the editing part, when you submit the revised paper, you change the title sometimes. You definitely improve the abstract and flow of the paper's writing. So maybe the high research highlighting points, 1 or 2 points are different than the earlier version. So make sure that you change the research highlighting points, and of course make a note this point in the rebuttal that you also change in the research highlight. So if you mention every detailed information in the rebuttal or in the review reply, then the associate editor and others will feel that you are very sincere person or sincere research group, and you do everything methodologically and just like a sincere person. When you submit in some journals, you need to submit the LaTeX file or doc file. You need to submit the changed final paper, edited paper with color. So this is one. And you need to submit the same file without color. I don't understand why without color. Maybe there is no maybe, because if you allow me to submit with color, because when I was submitting, then that journal we had to make sure that, okay, remove all the colors and make all black and white and so on. So another point is that make color on tables, because you may add some extra rows or columns. So you color it, because if the paper has lots of colors, that's good. If you have 3 reviewers, and for 3 reviewers they have 3 different colors, you may add it, but I don't think that it is important. Yeah, because overall, but do not need to just change 1 word, 2 words, 3 words, and so on. Yes, if the paper has lots of editing and you add paragraphs out of paragraphs, new thing, it may face another trouble, because a reviewer can think that, oh, this new submission has 30% new information, so I need to re-review those 30%. And why did you remove the other 30%? So that is another challenge. So you have to handle this part very smartly, and there is no pure strategy to follow. You do, use and with wisdom, and of course, do these kind of things with lots of meetings with your co-authors. This is important. We need to, as a reviewer, we need to put comments to editors like technical content, reference value, originality, weakness, compactness, presentation, and major and minor changes, which I mentioned again and again. So these things are, as an author, you need to address those things as well. Comments to the relevance to the journal, which is, I mentioned, the scope of the journal, so you have to reply. Potential to cause interdisciplinary discussion. This is also important. We ignore that if a paper can have the potential ability to start discussion about interaction between different techniques in soft computing, for example, interdisciplinary discussion, then it is considered as a good one, that it has wide review reader base, and so many other things. And also it is important to mention, but some work can be very specialized, no problem. reviewers must not share the information of the paper to anybody. Don't share. This is, we know. But in some cases, and you must not share, definitely. But in some cases, we find that, and we got this report because in Japan, after coming to Japan, I took a series of, research ethics and research methodology training from the government and the university through, and I have to pass those exams. So over there was, this point that some competitive reviewers may delay the review process, and they try to implement your concept, and by this time they may submit and reject your paper after much delay, after 8 months, for example, or maybe give major revision so that you try to do something, it will take another 6 months or something like this. By this time, your paper from the copied idea from the paper are accepted or something like this. So it may happen. As it happens, so it is covered in the ethical training or in Japan. So that's why I am saying that if you find that unnecessarily your paper is delayed by the system, so you must email to the editor-in-chief and others, why so delay and why so delay. But don't say why so delay. They will reply like this: oh, reviewers are busy, they are not accepting, they are not replying, something like that. But you can say like this, that most of the cases, if it is genuine, that your student will apply for a job or for a higher study case, or you need for promotion or something. So if you write like this, that one of the authors need this paper urgently, so if we get any decision of the paper, it will be very helpful, and so on. So what happens that being manobik, like soft-hearted, some associate editors or editor-in-chief, they will try to terminate the previous reviewer and engage another reviewer, something like this. So it happens, and it is helpful. So make sure that your paper is not on the system for unnecessary longer period. Okay, yes, some journals, they take 1 year, 1.5 years to review. That is okay. You know that that is the policy of that journal. But if another journal has nothing like that, then why will it take so much time? So after rebuttal, if much delay, email to editor or staff again and again. Okay, yeah. Methodology. Regarding methodology, this is important for authors, that if an experiment, check the method section first. Major flaws, like whether the method is unsound or pseudoscience, like not on factual and science, missing process are there, or the conclusion or the results are contradicting with the statistical or qualitative evidence as reported in the manuscript. So that's why it is important that you do these kind of things when you submit a paper, and as well as during the review reply. Examine data quality. This is another important part, that the data quality, a critical issue in research part is insufficient data points, statistically non-significant variations, or unclear data tables. So, and another point is that ethical consideration. So when you submit a paper, if you don't mention that the data, which is handling patient or animal or some children or other cases where it is needed to get ethical approval from your university or system, if you don't do that, then reviewer can ask you again. And on that time, if you cannot produce any evidence, the already time is gone, 6 months or 1 year, and it is delayed. So make sure when you submit, you make this statement and get the documents ready beforehand. So if they ask you, you can show it that, okay, we got this, and you just paste the information. If your university does not have this option, at least write a paper with there are already lots of templates in the website. Write the documents accordingly, get the approval from the dean of the or head or dean or the university head, and something like that. So these are the few things I just would like to mention, because for this purpose, in one journal when we submitted, it was much delayed because we did not take the approval from the subjects, but they wanted this. So what happened that we asked each of them after taking the data, and then took their approvals, and we told them that yes, now we got the approval, even though after the data collection, but the journal authority said, okay, we are okay with this because they agreed, they signed, and so on. So anyway, so there are different ways. Make sure that you do like that. For authors, this is also important. I'm mentioning what Computer Vision's #1 journal, which is International Journal of Computer Vision, IJCV. Another is IEEE Transaction Permit. So, so what they say, topmost journal, but they say that answer and amplify any negative answers. The author should have sufficient information to understand the basis of your criticism. Again, I'm saying that the topmost journal, they are saying that reviewers must, should means I say must, have sufficient information to understand the basis of the criticism. So if you find that the reviewers and reply or criticism is not clear, then you can mention it in the review reply, but try to answer, okay, in a smarter way. And you can mention it in the section of associate editor where you reply the associate editor that reviewer access comment number 1 or 2 is not clear to me because this criticism is like this, but we are not clear. I mean, if we get the basis of this criticism or a bit detail in future, we'll try to address, because keep it open, because big journals, it may take 2 years even, no problem. So this journal says for authors as well that references, research design, methods, results clearly presented or not, and of course in all cases the conclusions supported by the results. English language and style is important, and potential conflict of interest, plagiarism, self-citations, inappropriate self-citations by authors. You can cite your previous paper, but if it is not related, inappropriate, but we do it, then it's not good. Ratings, we know that there are different kinds of ratings and presentation and so on, so I don't want to go into details. This is another one. IEEE SMC, one of the IEEE's top societies. So what they say that if you recommend rejection, then please copy paste one of the following reasons for rejection. What? Insufficiently original, lacks of quantitative result or conclusion, poorly written, methods not sound, lacks impact, significance, or practicality, lacks experimental validation, where experimental validation would be highly desirable or essential. So just make sure that you try to fill up this each point as much as possible in your paper and in the rebuttal as well. So based on this idea, you will feel that what the reviewers, want, or why they make a decision, because all those points are important. If the reason is wrong, explain as much as possible, much more than you can write in the reverse paper. Provide references to argue on your points. Now, I say that when we submit, sometimes we do not get ready, prepared. So we say, oh, every paper is ready. Now I submit. But when you submit, you may need 1 hour, even more. Especially if you are new, not even new, because different journals, they have slightly different. So you need to be very careful while you submit. Now, it takes time to resubmit. So get ready with the information you need well ahead, like exact email addresses, because by this time, so for example, a paper may take 6 months, 1 year to get accepted in good journals. By this time, my two co-authors, one in America, another was in another part of America, and so on, they may prefer to use a new email address. They may prefer to use their university, or they may have restrictions that if they use the University of California XYZ, then it may have some other issues that the work is not done over there. So they may feel that, no, we want to keep the previous affiliation when we submit it. So you get the approval from them, latest affiliations, exact emails which are accurate, because when you submit the revise, you hope that the paper will be automatically accepted and go to the production. So after production, if there is no minor changes, then nothing to do. Funding information, there is a part, research funders. So if you work with some group and they pay something money or they are part of it, definitely they should have a source of money, not from the pocket, right? So make sure that you get the funding information, even the funding number and other things and society's information beforehand, so that you can put here. Article publishing charge. In some journals, it is free, so no problem. But in some journals, it's free journals, but not open access. So to keep the paper open access nowadays, we call it gold open access. So you have to pay like 25,000. No, not 25,000 is too much. Am I rich? 2,500 US dollar, for example. And if you pay, then they will keep the paper open access. So if you make it open access, then it will have more citations. Now, one of my recent papers, it is accepted, and I thought that, I mean, why should I pay money to keep my paper open access? So I did everything, no, and then finally submitted. After that, one of my bosses, he said that, did you keep the option for golden open access? I said, no, I don't want to waste money for that. And then he smiled at me and he said that, don't worry, our Osaka University pays for golden open access. So there is no problem, because this is the policy of the university. I know the reason, that if you make it open access, then more citations and the university ranking will be dot better than nothing. So see how much careful people are in terms of ranking and of course research accessibility and so on. So they are paying. So then we communicated and we'll pay. And no problem. Extra page charge. This happened that last year, that we tried to make sure that 10 pages in an IEEE transaction, exactly 10 pages. And Dr. Minu and myself, we spent so much time to even change some words, so that giri, Japanese word, means exactly the toitumbu, tai, 10 pages. We submitted, but definitely the production, they add some header, footer or something. So it moved from 10 plus 10 point something. For that purpose, now you need to pay. And I had to pay roughly $200 from my pocket. Of course, co-authors wanted to pay, but I said that don't worry, let me pay. So if we are not ready, that who will pay, how to pay, whether there is a credit card, or if we email them that please forgive us, we are poor people and so on, we don't have any funding. So how to deal that? So if you do not do these kind of things, so last moment you take stress and you cannot submit. And of course, get the file ready. File ready means rebuttal replies separately. It can be very professionally written, very good looking and very smart way to write. Number two, the PDF of the final paper, final manuscript or revised manuscript with color. And number three, without color. Number four, the original LaTeX file. Okay, and all images. In some journals, they have limitations of number of images. So this is important. Remember, some journals, I have a slide, but some journals, when you submit, the number of pages say 10. But when you submit the revised version, you can add 1 page extra or 2 page extra. Make sure that you know this, and based on this, you extend the paper. Okay, so there are options and so on. And then you go for submission, but you need to make sure that whether this kind of, so for beginning, or early authors, it is very difficult. If you are sole author, then you just select this one. Otherwise, if the co-authors are part of US government or this and that, if you none of these, just none of the above for this. And then you are signing as a corresponding author on behalf of the co-authors, and you mention your name and other information. Now, when we do, we have series of copyright related information, and it is important to know, because there's a learning and for the future as well. What are the author rights and what are the copyright meaning? So basically, in future, you don't need to read in details, because I'm explaining that exclusive right you give to the publisher, so they will do whatever they want to do. So you just say yes. Okay, it just like kabul in marriage, that you will take all responsibility. After marriage, we know what happens. Supplemental materials, it's optional. So supplementary materials means graphical, illustrative, video or audio material or something like that, or even text. And you also give, approval for them to publish. Research data, it is also optional, but not limited to raw data or processed data. It can be software, code, protocols, algorithms, methods, these kind of things. And you can also give the permission to the publisher to put this. But remember, these information must not be copyrighted. Like you give a software based on MATLAB, but MATLAB itself, need a paid version or something. So I'm not sure whether you can give the code to the research data part. I don't think so. This is my view based on my knowledge. But definitely you can check to the system, but it is not compulsory, so don't worry about that. Revisions and addenda, this is another point that you give that this is the final revision and so on, so blah blah blah. So all are okay, you just say yes, 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 I agree, just like points. But this part, we many times we say I agree, but this part is important, that what are the author's rights. Okay, so this is important. So it means that I retain. Many authors, they don't know, so they ask us, they fill the form, but again they ask us that can I put the it in the reprint, preprint, or can I put the accepted manuscript or published journal article for personal use or international institutional use? The answer is yes, you can. May I upload in the website? Yes, it is clearly saying that include the right to use these different versions of the article for scholarly sharing purposes. I am talking about Elsevier, but it's usually more or less common for everywhere. And I am mentioning for a journal which is not open access, and there is no article processing or publishing charge, no APC. So even that journal is saying that we can put the reprint on any website or repository at any time. Only thing is that we cannot do it on business purpose. Okay, and you can put the published journal article which is published finally only privately on certain websites. They don't mention what website, but of course you can privately means that you can put in the a different website. So somebody asks you, you share something like that. Another point is that some journals may require that all co-authors sign and submit the declaration and disclosure forms. I don't know why it's said that countries like Iran, Cuba, Sudan, Burma, Syria, and Crimea, those countries, they mention differently. So if you have any co-authors from these countries, you make sure that things are done differently, otherwise it will be delayed. Another important part, sometimes we cheat, we feel that, oh, my paper is published and done. No, it can be retracted later on. Retractions means that action by which a published paper in an academic journal is removed from the journal. So you can no longer say that it is published, because and it is mentioned that retracted. Reasons sometimes are mentioned, sometimes are not mentioned. So make sure that you don't make any mistake. And of course, there is a scope of withdrawal, but there are policies and so on, and steps are there. Remember that when we submit, we mention that this is original and written by the co-authors, all authors, and not been previously published. And when it is under review, even revision, it is not submitted, or it will not be submitted to any other journal. It covers conferences of IEEE SCM. I know that conferences in many domains are not copyrighted, just abstract or extended abstract or something, and not copyrighted. But in IEEE and SCM, Optical Society of America, these kind of things, basically most of the conferences we submit full papers, like single column, you can say minimum 10 to 20 to 25 pages, or double column 6 to to 10 pages and so on. So, and make sure that you don't do the same thing, not infringe any copyright in terms and privacy issues and other rights. So you make sure and obtain written permission from copyright owners for any part which is copyrighted materials or original images and so on. But just to give an example, that if you take images from the same publisher, you may not need to pay or need to apply for copyright. Just you mentioned that those are the images we reused from the same publisher. Like if I publish a paper in Springer, then when I submit, I mentioned that I use the Springer's materials. But other cases, if I want to get the permission, you need to pay $200, $300, sometimes $1,000. Okay. On that case, another strategy is that you email the authors and tell them that give me the photo or give me the approval, and by email they give you something or allow you, and then you just thank you them. So then it's not a big deal usually, but make sure that you do this is based on my just limited knowledge, but make sure that you do it smartly. And of course, regarding co-author issues, you do like this way. It's very sad that some countries are mentioned in this manner, but I don't know why. It's really strange. Author representations. If I am using any personal details or images of patients, or subjects or any other individuals, obtained all consents. I said ethical part, which is important. So patient consent and so on. Of course, for software, supplementary materials, which I mentioned earlier, free from viruses. Earlier I mentioned whether free, free software or not. So I might confuse that part, but you need to check because I'm not clear. I never submitted a code to the website, but make sure that it's free from virus and so on. This is the final one, that page length. I mentioned already that, for example, one journal in Elsevier, initial submission page limit is 7 pages in 2 columns. But during revision, there is a scope to make it 8 pages. So some authors, they don't know. So they try to revise the paper, but it's very hard because reviewers gave lots of comments and they cannot add all those in the paper. So what to do? So you check that whether your paper in the revised submission allow you extra pages, or if you can pay, then extra pages by payment, or if both options are gone or not available, then submit as supplementary materials. So what you can do, that review rebuttal and then make 2, 3 extra 4 pages extra materials as supplementary materials with additional tables and explanations and equations and so on. Sometimes we call in some journals as appendix, okay, and so on. So in that way, you can make it better. So with that, I'd like to conclude that I put few points. Definitely, it's very difficult to please all the reviewers. And these are based on my little experiences. For this presentation, it took, lots of time for me to prepare from different journals and thinking and others and getting the points as much as possible. Definitely, there are more points to explore to how to reply the reviewers. The first goal is to, I feel for me and for others, that write the paper the best way you can so that you can get minor revision at the beginning and hopefully no harsh comments or less difficult comments and so on. Be positive and give best efforts. Remember, your paper can be rejected by a reviewer who is not an expert. Most of the cases, we cannot find the related experts. We find people who are related more or less. Definitely, I don't find a reviewer who is from botany or zoology, but something like that. And another point is that sometimes, or many cases, reviewers are young undergrad, not graduate students, like masters or PhD students. And most of them have almost no experiences to deal a good journal or good conferences. So they can just try and give some feedback, which may be right, which may be wrong. Like, for example, one grad student, from America, he just mentioned that the paper is very good, accept it. In the paper review comment, he mentioned it, accept it, but that paper was rejected. Finally. So I mean, never mention if you are a reviewer that it's a good, I mean, you praise the paper, but don't say that, oh, good, and accept it as it is. Okay, then it becomes a burden for the associate editors what to do, because some other reviewers gave genuine comments and rejected the paper or gave major revision. Anyway, so share, I requested you at the beginning and now as well, that let's share your additional points so that I can also learn from you, and we can learn from each other. So with that, I thank you all, and IEEE Computer Society Bangladesh chapter to organize this webinar. And this is the webinar of ICIEV and IVPR series number 7. Let's work the hardest to do better. And if you need to get through more, like research methodology, writing ethics, or journal, conference, and so on, so I have few more lectures under this, ahadvisionlab.com, and notes. And these are from like different journals or publishers like Nature, Elsevier, OSA, IEEE, ACM, having lots of kicks from many reviewers in my life. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Ahad, for your nice and informative session. So it's now for the question answering session. So as I mentioned,
find so
earlier,
many questions in the comment, right? Comment section.
Yes, that's what I was just saying. Some questions were arised in the chat box. However, I am grateful that Mr. S.M. Atiqur Rahman has explained a lot of questions answered in the chat box. So thank you, Professor.
Okay, great.
However, if anyone, I think some of you have, if you have any question, feel free to ask Professor Ahad. And
so may I just go to the questions
Bengali
first?
Community, yeah, for the Bengali community, you can ask your question in Bengali. Don't hesitate to question. Okay.
Yes, thank you. So just I try to quickly look at the chat boxes, and then meanwhile you try to make your questions. So the paper review process is confidential. The professor supervisor should not give papers to student. It's true, but I found many cases that, I mean, because and so on. So this is one. What are your suggestions for young researchers in light of the context of today's session? Just work hard, remain positive, not corona positive, and give time, and Rome was not built in a day. We cannot be a better researcher in a day. It is a long learning process. So never think that within a short time we can do. So this is point. Does reviewing again the paper is counted in reviewer's profile? The answer, as I know, is no. So reviewer, even if they, I mean, they review again, it will not be counted that they reviewed twice or something. So they reviewed for one paper and so on. So why associate editors are unpaid? Yeah, this is, I mean, associate editors, for example, I'm part of some journals as associate editors, and how much efforts you can't imagine that almost every week we have to deal with one new paper, and we need to assign 10, 15 related reviewers. 2 or 3 of them may accept to review and they delay and so on, and then see the comments, and then find another reviewer, something like this process going on and on and on. But we don't get anything. Forget about reviewers. I know one journal from LC Springer, the editor-in-chief of the journal was my friend, and he was a keynote speaker in our conference, ICIEV, International Conference on Informatics, Electronics and Vision, in Bangladesh before. So, and when we are discussing, I asked him that as an editor-in-chief, how much you get? See, that journal had impact factor on the time almost 2.5 or something. It's a good journal from Springer, and 2.5 in computer vision imaging on the time was really good. Okay, even today it's good. So in biological or chemistry, maybe 2.5 is nothing, but anyway. So that professor told me from US that he gets one check per year, sometimes 3,000 US dollars, sometimes 4,000 US dollars, something like that, not more than this. And I am part of associate editor for different journals, and they earn a lot, but I never get anything. So this is not even a gift. So then, yeah, Ashrafur Rahman mentioned there is no money. I get a comment where the reviewer mentioned that as file, but no file was attached. So I asked the editor to send it to me. Excellent. So direct message to me by one. So I'm not mentioning. If possible, please send you recording. Okay. So what we'll do that we will, just put in my YouTube channel. So and IEEE Computer Society Bangladesh chapter Facebook group. So hopefully you can get it, or because after this chat we cannot access your email address as well. So if you kindly email me, then definitely I can share with you. Otherwise I will forget, though it's very related to my name, Ahad and something. Okay, how to make your writing good up to the mark? It's very difficult. I gave some points. What I feel that I attended a workshop at Kyoto University, and the speaker, the trainer is a famous person from Germany, and she worked with Nobel laureate as well. So it was a selected event and for a longer period. So I can remember only one point. She said that most of the scientists, when they submit their project report or submit something, a paper, what they do, they spend working, improving until the last moment, and they don't give any time to the presentation or reporting. But she said that roughly 25% of your time should be engaged on your report writing or on your paper writing and something like that, because, or the presentation, because you know your work very well, but when you present something to someone else who is not familiar with your work, if you do not get time and in hurry to submit, definitely you cannot write the best way you feel. Okay, so that's why it is important. I have few lectures in YouTube as well. You can visit my website or the channel, that paper writing or paper editing, there are some lectures recently I shared as well, so you can find. Another question is that, okay, full video, you can get it. Okay. In a recent paper, Professor Astaf wrote, first reviewer wrote 2-3 long paragraph and completely rejected the paper. His suggestions were not addressable. So we just thank him for the valuable comments. Yeah. Why sending paper in a journal where it's not in scope and somewhere else? See, we submit to a journal, we think that it is okay, but a reviewer may feel that that paper is not relevant to the journal, but it's actually wrong, because if the paper is not relevant to journal, it should be rejected before sending to the associate editor or before sending to the reviewers. So when a reviewer said that it is out of the scope, basically it's not appropriate to write. Because already it is within the scope, that's why it is submitted. So if a reviewer says like that, it's not appropriate, I think. Anyway, so again, we have another answer. Thank you so much. Can I add author after acceptance? It is impossible. Okay, you cannot add. You can only add, during the first submission, and during the revised submission you can add, but I mentioned that it's a tedious process. Most of the journals and conferences, they give you some extra time and pressure and policies, so you can see like this. Are there any funding agencies for development who cannot pay? There may be something, but I don't know. But one thing is that for developing countries, many journals, they have option for, low-income countries and something. This is number one. Number two, I just tell you that recently we submitted a paper to a journal of Nature, and then when we submitted, we emailed the publisher that I'm serving Nature scientific reports for, I mean, from the beginning and so on. So can I get waiver because the work is from developing country, Bangladesh, and our university cannot pay, and so on and so forth. So what they said, they gave me the option that you take, I mean, and write an application or write a letter from the head of the faculty or the department that this project, this work, you are the authors and there is no funding, then submit to us. We will handle how to deal with this. So see, there are options. And I know that few other cases, and I also published in few journals where payment were needed, but I did not pay anything. There are two things that if you serve them, like if you are an associate editor or if you are a regular reviewer of those journals, you can ask them that, see, I'm serving you and I have no money, so why don't you help me? I know it's difficult, but at the same time, there are lots of journals where you don't need to pay. So go for IEEE transactions or IEEE's different journals. Okay, not the IEEE open journals, which are recent last year established by every society. It's paid. Springer, Elsevier, and Wiley Publications, some others. There are lots of journals, good journals, and not all are difficult journals. So that's why it is important. I know that publishers like MDPI or Hindawi and others, they give very quick review results. But I have papers in those two publishers as well. But definitely my community will give me more priority to my work, which are published in IEEE or ACM or Springer or Elsevier, and not open access. But so that's why it is important that it's not about the it's not about the Q1 or Q2 only. It's not about the impact factor only. It's about the publisher itself. And also a publisher a publisher has so many different journals. Not all journals are same. Just like, I mean, a great author cannot have all books great. Some of the books are great. Otherwise, all the books will get Nobel Prize. Okay, it's not happening. So that's why, we need to be careful where we try to submit. And okay, I think Arafat, he mentioned, if there are two reviewers and the reviewers of these two reviewers is completely opposite, like one reviewer, do not encourage submit and other. Okay. Basically, if there are two reviewers, two different comments, then associate editor should assign a third reviewer to get a biased decision, like towards accept or towards measure or towards reject or something like that. So anyway, there is no base strategy. It depends on who is saying what. But definitely, if your work is towards your domain, then you try to answer the other reviewers and try to satisfy him with lots of arguments. And sometimes Dr. Ashraf mentioned that he just thanked him, but what I do, instead of just thanking, I also mention, if I find that someone is totally disagreeing and rejecting, in fact, but I mentioned that I think that you are not satisfied with our work, for example, but let us explain why our work is good or compatible and something. So we give lots of points. And what I do, or we did in few cases, that say the journal is pattern recognition or IEEE transaction something, I try to search similar work of similar level on that journal, which are published on that journal, or similar kind of level, like same quality journals recently. And then I mention those papers. Say, for example, I used 2 data sets in the paper, which are not so good, for example, or 5 data sets, which are all smaller. But nowadays we have bigger data set. But what I did, we found a paper that same journal just few months before published, instead of 5, only 2 same small, data sets. And we mentioned that this paper was published recently, this journal. So it means that my paper is better than this one because we use 5 and our result is better and so on. So you can argue and try to satisfy, because at the end, associate editor cannot make a decision if multiple reviewers say reject the final decision, because it is recorded, and racism is there. So it is also, I mean, and another point basically. What to do when a reviewer says to share the Python code along with the saved CNN model for review and reproduce? What if it doesn't work on their system? Good question. If they ask, definitely you need to share, and you share through the editor-in-chief's approval, or CC with them, or through the system. Okay, this is one. A reviewer must not email you in person during the review process, because you should not know the reviewer. You can know the reviewer only for few journals which I mentioned, when the paper will be published, not before. So this is important. So you, and if it doesn't work, no problem. Then they will ask that, and you mentioned that we have this system, this background, these are the things, and so on. So I don't think that it will be a big problem for you. Okay. Another direct message from Dr. NS. What to do when asked about the methodology, that the used method is old, and suggest to use or propose another method. This is a problem, definitely. But again, if a method seems to be old, but you can find similar recent papers in similar top journals, like where you submitted, same level journals, and then you give examples that these methods are used by this. I gave one example, like nowadays in computer vision or image processing or sensor, machine learning, AI, my field, IoT, people say deep learning, deep learning, deep learning. Yes, deep learning is excellent for big data sets. Deep learning is excellent, and no option for computer vision and image processing, medical imaging, and so on. But still, there are some domains where, options are there for non-deep learning based approaches. So the reviewer vehemently went against us, that why didn't we explore deep learning? Then we answered, give huge amount of valid documentations that see this global challenge, these global competitions. Luckily, I was part of them and some of their organizers, so I knew them, even if I don't know and are part of that, but we can give this kind, and I referred a book. Luckily, that book was written by me and my co-authors. So we gave the reference of that chapter and book, and gave clearly that this statement, this paper, this paper. So we showed them that yes, new methods or deep learning or this has good results, but at the same time, there are still scopes for this and this, because there are lots of scopes. So in that way, you can argue, but you need to give lots of, recent papers with good journals, similar level, and show them that there are still options. If you feel that but the reviewer is, going totally against you, and very difficult to get the paper accepted, on that case, you try to teach him or her more, with a hope that through your information, the person will feel soft, that, oh, I learned now and I accept it. But yeah, this is the point. Another point from Abdullah Sajid from Dhaka University, Tripoli Department. My question is, what features do predatory journals have so that we can identify and avoid them? Okay, and for young students like me aspiring for future researcher, what journal should we target? Okay, usually researchers do not target a journal at the beginning. We try to target a goal to achieve, to solve a problem. And when the results are in hand, during that time, we feel based on the results or methods or findings, because you never know what will happen. Because you are a new researcher. Yes, an experienced person may consider that, oh, this kind of work can be submitted up to this range of journals or conferences, just like a good cook, well, I mean chef. But if you are not a good cook, early researcher is an, I mean, just you are learning how to cook. Okay, on that case, you never know that whether your food will be servable or not. Okay, so that's why, I mean, it is important that don't worry about where you submit, but of course you target good forums. Now, regarding predatory journals, and how to avoid them, definitely you just don't, no need to submit. There are some websites, but I don't think you need to go into the websites to find which one is predatory or not. Just simply go to the established publishers, and they have every year established publishers like Springer, Elsevier, Taylor and Francis, Wiley Publishers, and so many others, even Sage. Each domain, you have domain specific journals. Like Sage Publishers is not so common in, I mean, engineering domain. They have some journals, but it is more common in business or social science, for example. So there are different things. And biological science, they have another. IEEE is not biological science related, or ACM is not biological science related, and so on. So uh, each society or publisher, they introduce new journals, and not all journals are top level. So a few journals become top level, some journals are medium, some journals remain weaker, but still those are established journals. My point to all, minimum try for Scopus indexed journal or conferences. Again, I'm saying minimum Scopus index, so that, I mean, you can avoid everything. This is number one. Number two, you can visit my website, which you can see ahadvisionlab.com slash what do you call it? And it's not coming, notes. Anyway, so over there, which, I mean, fake journal and how to decide good journal or bad journal, there is a lecture of 10-15 minutes, so you can go for it. That is another point. So I hope that, Sajid, you got my answer. If you need, as you are from the same department, so we can get. I have published papers where reviewers gave 100 plus comments. The best policy is to just forget about the paper for a few days and chill. Anyway, this is different people have different strategies, but most important thing that what Ashraf said, that Dr. Ashraf, that make clear mind, start reading the comments and start the rebuttal process and do brainstorming. I mean, yeah, this is important. Very nice point. Okay, and Zillur Rahman said, what to do when the editor suggests to transfer the article in another journal? Yes, nowadays you submit to a beta journal, and the editor refers the journal to a less known journal or new journal of the same publisher, like Springer, Elsevier, IEEE, they do, I think. IEEE, I'm not sure, but Springer, Elsevier, they do for sure. So if you are okay, you can just say yes, no problem. But if you say that, no, I don't agree, I want to submit to a beta journal, then you can go for it. So what happens that when they move to another journal, because I'm part of some of the journals and I was part of, so I saw that they share the previous review information, and new associate editor of the new journal, another journal, or new assigned reviewer, they can see the previous review comments and your rebuttals, and then make a decision. Remember, just like our universities, just like journals and conferences, everything, it has its own ranking. Okay, so I mean, so based on these we submit, based on these we work. So our universities are not MIT, Harvard, and Stanford, unless some of you are here from MIT or Harvard or Stanford. So it means that, I mean, journals or conferences, they have also levels. So you know your work. Now, this is a tricky thing. How can I know the level of my journals or work and the related journals? It is tricky. Definitely, if your supervisor is good, knowledgeable, and I mean, keep in touch, then you can know. If you cannot, then another option is that um, you discuss with someone. It is also difficult. Don't share the work. You just mentioned that you used this kind of data sets. You got you developed a new method, you got the result. And basically when you work, if your work is not rubbish, basically you know, I mean, basically you read different journals and conference papers, and based on this you know that what kind of results are published in which journals and what about your results. Based on these you can decide. Personally, I have an Excel file. I make different journals. I put the name of the journals, the website. I make it free or not, and then review time like 1 year or 6 months or 2 months, something like this. Easy or difficult, what kind of works they publish, new journal or old journal. This kind of attributes I write down. So based on my works, I put next to the journal level in the Excel file. So through this process, when I plan to submit to a journal, I look at that Excel file made by myself for my own, for me. So this way I can do. So this is one of the strategies you can do. Another point is that in many cases, you will find that journals have no Scopus index or no, I said many cases. In few cases, you will find that there are some journals, no Scopus index, no impact factor, but from, I mean, great scientific societies, long-lasting societies, especially from China or Japan or Korea, because these countries, they have some societies, their legacies are excellent. Mostly they published Chinese or Japanese or Korean, I mean, journals by their own language. But then they started to English, I mean, journal at the same time, or English part. They have their own Japanese and English part as well. So even though the journals, I mean, don't have, I mean, strong thing like impact, not a strong thing like impact factor or Scopus, because they don't have this business policy, or they don't have that much, I mean, efforts to make get the, I mean, indexing and so on. So they just continue. But those journals are good. At least not fake journals, at least not predatory journals, and I mean this kind of. So you can also submit to those journals. I publish, this is good for me because I was in Japan. I have been in Japan for, I mean, for 16 years. And every year I visited Japan, and I have many friends. I visited many universities in Japan. I love Japan. So that helps me to know different journals within Japan and Japanese societies. I know the Japanese societies which are related to me, and their journals, sometimes I look into those. So these are the another option. So if you are in Korea or others, then so don't just jump into, I mean, ranking on and something like that. Okay, there are good journals without even having good ranking, but social values or among the researchers, they have better values. So that's the point. And it's very difficult, of course, it's not easy to find. If the publisher is good, then how about the necessary to see the indexing like Scopus? Normally, if the publisher good question, Rafid, that if the publisher is good, then within one, is because to get the Scopus index for any journal, because I started a journal, but we tried, and then it takes, I mean, 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, and then after you apply for the Scopus index first, then SCI index, and then SCI. So Scopus index takes 6 months or 1 year. So overall, a new journal having 3-4 years old, they can get the Scopus indexing. So I mean, ultimately they get Scopus indexing and then SCI indexing as well, or impact factor. So if your work is new, not that much novel, I recommend that you submit to established publishers, new journals, and you search for that. In my list, I also did that, and I submitted to some new journals. Like for the one of my papers was published in Halloween, which becomes now a Q1 journal. It was just a new journal. Few years back, it was started. It was open access journal, but my paper was one of the earliest papers. And I wrote to the editor-in-chief that I cannot pay, even though that was open access, and maybe $2,000 or something, but they gave me free. And now that journal, when I submitted, it was not even Scopus index, but now it is, I mean, a Q1 journal. and so on. So that's why I'm saying that, I mean, try because that the journal is from Elsevier, so that is point, as I recall. Okay, and I found an article on pattern recognition letters on K-means clustering. Okay, I reproduced it and found some limitations. Wonderful. I worked on that and submitted to the same journals. After 1 month, the editor told that my work has not much originality, whereas one of their works has limitations. What to do in such situation? It's very difficult because you submitted the PRL and they rejected on originality issues. They felt that your work, you may if found some limitations, it's very good. But I'm not sure how much rigorously you did that, because K-means clustering is very well-established method. So when we go against anything which is well-established in a society or knowledge domain and something, we need to show profoundly mathematically first, and then find things experimentally, prove it. So that is, I mean, one point. So in that regard, I think that PRL rejected, because PRL is a good journal, even though impact factor is only 3.3 or something, but it is considered as very good journal on pattern recognition by IEEPR, which is International Association of Pattern Recognition #1 society, you can say, globally. So thank you so much for your wonderful questions, and especially Dr. S.M. Ashrafur Rahman. I'm not sure who you are, but I really appreciate your, I mean, answers one after another, and all are wonderful. And I hope that if you have any questions, you can ask directly, or if you have any comments like which I missed in this presentation, then we can discuss and we can learn. Otherwise, we can conclude the session soon. Any questions from the audience directly?
I think it's a long session, already 9 here in Bangladesh.
Okay.
So thank you, Professor Ahad. And if I'm not wrong, Dr. S.M. Ashrafur Rahman is currently in Queensland University of Technology, which I found in Google Scholar. So thank you, Dr. S.M. Ashrafur Rahman, for your
Yes, thank you very much
comments.
indeed. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we had a long session and we had a very good question answering session. With that, I also like to conclude our session today. Once again, thank you very much, Professor Ahad, for your nice session. And I also would like to inform our participants to submit your original works to ICIEV conference or IVPR conference, which will be held in August. And I wish a very good success of the conference. So thank you all for participating in this session, and hope to see your engagement in our future activities. So thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you indeed. And if anyone has any questions or query further, you can knock me by email or in Facebook Messenger. I still use. I wanted to stop Facebook, but then a few months later, I found that, I mean, I can communicate with many young researchers and my former students, and I can learn from them a lot. And I get inspirations from many young researchers, their publications and so on. So so you can knock me. If I don't reply, then knock me after 1 week, because sometimes when you have, I mean, knocked me or emailed me on that time, I'm super busy, I could not reply. So after 1 week, you should try. This is I do even when I communicate with others, especially on important issues. So thank you so much. So we can stop it here. You can close it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you all.